This week on American Grindstone, we're sitting down with my buddy Mark. Mark Bjorkland is one of the fastest men in the world. Accomplished a land speed record 40 years old with his elbows 2 inches from the ground at over 200 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats. Let's see what takes this guy to the next level. Buckle up, because Mark is going to take us 200 miles an hour towards the horizon as we hear his story about him and Super Rat.
The Grindstone.
My sonny boy kept his nose to the grindstone.
Never give up, never surrender.
Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Glad to have you on American Grindstone. I've known you for 10 or 15 years, maybe longer.
Wow. I think you preached at Cornerstone, New Horizon,
Yeah,
or
New
with
Horizon.
Rick Todd. And I remember you pacing on the stage, and you were just you were preaching, and I really enjoyed it, and that was impactful on me. I was like, man, I like this guy.
You know what it was? I was speaking about suffering, and actually, I think I came and preached twice in a row, and I preached on Habakkuk. I remember that time. Yeah. And instant connection, right? Like, I think the thing I've always liked about you, Mark, and I was sharing earlier, you know, when I penciled this out in my idea book a couple years ago, this idea of this podcast, I wrote your name down because the very ethos of what we're about, people that aren't content with just 9 to 5, but pursuing their passions and dreams beyond their day job, you're the first person that came to mind. And I've watched you from afar and from close, and I've got to kind of weave in and out of your life in different seasons. And like I shared, I've watched the documentary that you created, you and Ryan Stiles and Chad created.
Amazing.
Out of nothing. I've watched it a half a dozen times because it's a beautiful story, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm just super stoked to have you here. Like, my heart just leaps out of my chest. I'm excited because I just feel like, I just get this is my brother.
Yeah. And
I just get it. Like, this is the conversation. This is the ideal that I've had this whole time.
This kind of was the conversation, if you will, when you first told me about the podcast. This was kind of like, and I got this guy, Mark. You're gonna love him. He's great. And it's like, okay, so it's like that kind of gave me the understanding for the podcast, and also is kind of the biggest story, I'd say, so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Well,
because I was the first one, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Jerk.
I forgot.
So, Mark, tell me about, you grew up here?
Yeah, Everett, Lake Stevens. I was born in Everett, 1969. So I'm 54 years old, youngest of 6.
Oh, wow.
And my mom and dad immigrated from Finland in 1959. So we were all born here. I guess you'd call us first generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, the Northwest has always been home for sure, and Bellingham since 1986. We moved around a lot, but we did 1 year in Finland in 1979. My dad went to pastor a church over there, and we spent a year there. Wow. And that was a great experience. All our relatives are over there, cousins, aunts, uncles. So
it's also great to see where your parents are from too. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, I think the thing that I love about you is, you're one of the hardest working guys I know. And for as long as I've known you, you do concrete work all day. And that's
which is so hard. Have you seen these guys do concrete? I'm like,
well, you have to do it till you're 80 to stay in shape.
yes.
Yeah.
Or until you break your back, one or the other.
Yeah.
And then when you're done, you're done.
Every concrete guy you see has funny joints and a bad back, and I was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way. But it's kind of like breaking in an engine. You know, if you break in an engine just in the worst possible way, and you express that these are my demands.
Yes.
You are going to do this and perform under these, this abuse.
Yep.
And so that occurred early on, like working at the floating dock company. I was 19, and there was all these busted up old finishers.
Huh.
You wait till you're 45. And
Yeah.
I was like, no. And I'd go flying across the shop and land on my knees and beating out pins and stripping forms. And I just was like, no, my knees are going to understand that this is the call they have
Yes, they
Yeah,
must
for their
submit.
life. And it's probably not the right concept. I've just beat my body and done everything backwards, wrong,
Mhm.
and stupid from day one. And I'm in great shape.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a testament to God or, you know,
Yep. Hard work.
doing.
Yeah.
I
It's
think you're just supposed to work every day and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
So
it's like poetry when you say that too. It's just almost poetic. Like you just beat yourself into submission, and then they will follow suit.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel lucky and blessed to be in great shape and pouring concrete every day. And to me, it's like the easiest job you can have.
Sure.
It's just easy money.
Yeah.
So all you got to do is smear it around.
You just gotta smear. You know, I think.
You just put it so simply. I've seen you guys do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Yeah.
I can't just smear it around and make it look like.
I couldn't do it. Yeah.
You can have some really bad days.
Yeah.
Like don't pour concrete at 2:00.
Yes.
In the middle of August.
Yes. Because by 3:30 you are fighting uphill.
Oh man, we had some pours this summer, and it was just like your t-shirt's wet, you're just pouring sweat, and you can't stop and drink a water or go sit in your truck for 5 minutes and recover. You just can't. You got
Mhm.
45 minutes and it's broomed and you're done. But concrete's a really boring topic.
It sure is. But it's what you do after the concrete that's always
Yeah.
like piqued my curiosity, because you guys are land speed racers, and you build some of the sexiest motorcycles I've ever seen. You and your brother,
Oh
Carl,
yeah.
and a handful of buddies in and out over the years. The bike I think about all the time. It's been my dream bike since the day I saw it, and I can't remember the name. And I looked all over the internet for it. It was the one with the Jason mask guy on the side of the tank. And it had the two different
that
size
was,
headlights.
the Quiet Riot album.
Yeah.
That was now I got to remember the name. That was Carl's creation. It
Yeah.
was so great.
That sounds amazing.
I can't believe I can't think of the name.
Yeah.
Because it was so good. That was a really neat bike.
Oh,
I don't even know where it is now.
to this day, it's like
It'll
the
come back to
standard.
me later on. But I wanted to cap on that comment you made about the documentary Out of Nothing, because it showed that it was just regular dudes
Mm-hmm.
that were passionate and worked really hard and were dedicated to this, and it requires a certain amount of sacrifice and discipline to go and achieve a record.
Yeah.
You know, they don't just hand them out.
Yep.
And you really have to, there's 90 items that have to line up, and millimeters, and I mean, just I could go on and on about bearings and chain lubrication, just tire pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, just all the, it's just it's just a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, watching you guys, it was almost like you guys were answering to some calling that you guys were like, we have to do this. It really inspirational.
Well, and I think that's what when we were kids, we went through a lot of hardship, and some of it was self-induced because we were my parents were really living by faith, and sometimes you don't get prosperity or
Mhm.
health, or there's a lot of hardship you go through, but I think those experiences help shape you, and you become comfortable with it, and then you kind of miss it when you don't have it, because
Mhm.
it's what
Mm-hmm.
it bolsters you, and I think my first couple of years land speed racing, it was so easy. There wasn't any challenge to it other than, I was humbled the first year because I thought I was going to go 140 and I
Right.
went 110 and I didn't get the record. And I had this whole pie in the sky dream of like, oh, my first year going, I'm going to get a record. And
Yeah.
it's
Here
going to
it
be
is.
awesome. And I built this motorcycle and it was very humbling, which is good because that's the first thing you need to learn at Bonneville is that it's humbling.
Mhm.
And it's not going to go as you planned. And so I think I was I wanted to go 200 miles an hour, and
Jeez.
I took a pen and wrote it right on my dashboard, 200 miles an hour, and so I could look at it, and there would be this bullseye staring at me every day, and then with no streamlining in special construction, you don't have any streamlining.
Mhm.
And special construction is a home built frame. And then in 2000 cc class, I married up 2000 cc engines. So it was and it became 11 feet long, and it was just really really hard to ride.
And it's twin Ducatis,
yeah,
right?
so everything about it was difficult, and with Carl and our friend Tim's an engineer and really really knowledgeable and skilled craftsman, and he was he'd tape out the triangulation and what I'd get frame tubes in and get stuff pieced together, and then he'd come over every day, okay, and so
That's great.
it wasn't something that just I dreamed up out of my head. There's
Mhm.
always a lot of people involved that, because you're trying to solve a riddle. It's like, well, what can break? Harmonic tremors and all that vibration. You're at red line for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Stuff breaks, falls off. You just. I'm always stressed out about the axle nuts and my handlebar clamps.
Uh-huh.
The engine can blow up, or a tire failure. Tire failures are a big one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just wanted I wanted something difficult,
Yeah.
and it took 4 years and 7 passes down the salt
Wow.
because of rainouts and different things for me to get over 200 miles an hour. But it was just an amazing experience, and it was really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just-
I've laid on that bike. I remember the first time I laid on it, and I think my elbows are 2 or 3 inches from the ground, right? And you're going 200 miles an hour on your stomach, being pushed by twin Ducati engines behind you. And there's no, like, all the gauges and everything are back on the engines. All you have in front of you is the RPM gauge, right?
No, I didn't have any gauges.
Oh, you had no
I
gauges.
just had the tire.
Oh wow.
I could stare at the tire. But it's
So tell us a little bit about, like, Bonneville as the great equalizer, right? Because I hear
Yeah.
guys all the time like, oh, my bike could go 200 miles an hour. Like, and it always cracks me up when people say that because Bonneville is a very unique place for people to go and race.
yeah, at sea level on pavement with traction, factory R1 will go 194 or something. And then and you take that to Bonneville and it'll go 145. Right? I mean, it's just throw 30 miles an hour out the window because you have no traction and you're at a mile above sea level, or it's 4,800 feet or something, but your density altitude calculates to like 10,000 feet some days.
Oh,
you
wow.
know,
Wow.
you have this wet, moist air coming off the lake bed, so it's like a thick, dense air, but it's not rich in oxygen. So it's like after 150, it's like cutting through yogurt,
Huh.
and all that's packing up on your frontal area, and you're just a brick. So, and then you don't have any traction, so you're trying to wait or ballast your bike. Like, I was 900 pounds with me and the bike.
Wow.
It was 700 without me, 900 with me, and it was about 450 on the back
Mm-hmm.
and 350 on the front. Is that right? My math is wrong. But anyway, I was about 100 pounds heavy on the back, which is kind of weird because it's like your center of pressure can be off and it's like throwing an arrow backwards.
Uh-huh.
But because it was so long, it's kind of holding you in a wind envelope.
Yeah.
And then the two engines were V-twins at 10,000 RPM, so those were acting as gyros, and then the two wheels at 200 are acting as gyros.
Yeah.
So you got kind of 4 gyros holding you vertical. Because it would just fall over if I sat on it and I tried to take off. I had to like launch to 20 miles an hour, and then it started to feel like a motorcycle.
To be in that motion to keep you upright.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
That's crazy.
your
900 pounds.
we had to join the engines off the countershaft sprockets, so both transmissions were shifting at the same time.
Wow.
So I was always nervous about one of them shifting and not the other one, and then it killing them or killing one or the other, and then that would lock up the back wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to shift it like a trucker, just really carefully, click, and then slowly let out the clutch. Okay, it's good. And so by 100 miles an hour, I was into 6th gear. And then it was just pull on the throttle. And if you can imagine that feeling, the closest I can explain it is if you've been really fast in a boat, it's like feels 10 times faster than in a car.
Yeah.
There's something about it. And so being that close to the ground and stretched out like Superman, it was just, you couldn't control anything. There was no inputting with your hips like on a motorcycle. You know, you have your foot weight distribution and your hips and your handlebars, you're steering opposite and doing all the motorcycle stuff that you normally would do. This one, there was nothing. My feet were above my head, and all I could do was stretch out. I couldn't even crank the throttle with my wrist, well, because this one's kind of jacked up. And so I tied a hose clamp, or I clamped a hose clamp to my throttle where I could push with my thumb the last half inch and get it to full throttle. And so once I was finally in 6th gear and could start rolling on, well, then you can imagine the power of 250 horsepower and 800 pounds is just like, I don't even know how to explain it, but everything just leaves your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're focused so intently on operating this machine to the best you've ever done anything in your life. Because if you make a mistake, you die.
Mm-hmm.
So you just had to pass this test. And so there was fear before and fear afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as soon as you left the line, there was no room in your head for anything but full concentration. And that took a lot.
Yeah.
And your eyes go blurry. The helmet shake is so violent. You got flags they're 100 feet apart every quarter mile, and then you see them disappear because it's like a train track. You can kind of see the curvature of the earth because it's 50 square miles. So you're making course corrections as you see the flags, and you're setting yourself up, but your eyes are going blurry, or the white stripe is coming down the middle of your visor from the salt, and by the time you're up to 200, 203, you're doing a football field every second.
Holy cow.
1001 is 300 feet. So you can, you kind of got to be about right there by the time you're like, and it was just so violent and so sketchy. And I just wanted somebody else to ride it. So we could compare notes or talk about the experience.
You wanted someone else on this earth that
I
knew that that experience. Yeah.
Nobody gets to do this.
Yeah.
I built the bike, operated it, and could only share the story from my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it was finally like year 4, because there were so many rainouts and traction problems, and I did 197, and the tower was like, Mark, you're leaving a rooster tail like a hydroplane. It's like whoosh, 100 feet
Yeah.
behind your bike. I didn't feel much other than he was like, yeah, it feels kind of weird.
Yeah.
But the record run the morning of, I had switched sprockets, so I was geared for like 228.
Mhm.
And all the old wise men said, don't do it, don't do it. When it breaks loose, it's going to light up. I was like, I was thinking that I was going to sort of lug the engine a little bit and create traction. And what happened as I saw the 4 flags. There's 4 flags when you're entering the timed mile, and you have to maintain speed for 1 mile.
Okay.
I might need some water.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have fresh water right here.
Oh, look at that. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Cheers.
I get
What I
to
do,
talk.
my friend. Take care of our own around here.
Mm-hmm. Good on you.
So I had gotten into my last gear. I was coming up to full throttle or full peak speed. I saw the 4 flags, and I was like, all right, we're going really good. And all of a sudden it lost traction, and I felt it pitch sideways. And I was like, oh, that was a lot. Because if it felt like about that much up here, I'm thinking
Yeah.
like, well, back there it's compound. I just went 4 feet sideways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I let off, and then I didn't know where to come back to, because I was like, well, I want to keep this speed.
Yeah.
And so I just backed off like an 1/8 inch and held it there.
And
Was like, well, this is about right. And when I pulled off the course, somebody always drives to meet you, or somebody at one of the tents down there. And, I pulled off, and I just dumped the bike on its side, because there's no kickstands and nothing gets hurt. It's just like, I run back and look at my gauges and check the temperature, and okay, we're at 190. This is really good. And then a kid comes pulling up in a car, and he was like, 205. And I was like, yes.
Oh my gosh.
And but then I was immediately nervous, because I have to do a return run.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
And so they take the entry and exit speeds for 1 flying mile,
Mhm.
and then you have to do another run in the opposite direction, because of wind changes there could be. So you kind of got to prove it both directions.
Holy cow.
Prove
So-
it. That's crazy.
And you can't do anything to your bike other than you can oil your chain, check you can change spark plugs, but you can't do any tuning. You got to leave it the way it was. You go to impound, it's called.
Oh wow.
And it's kind of like little jail, but it's a good place it's a good jail to be.
Yeah.
And so we went to the other end, and I'm discussing with my friend John Levi was there, and I was like, John, and he was one of the ones who said, don't put that sprocket on.
Yeah.
Like, well, now what do I do? Because I got to hold it. What if I don't pick the right speed, and I do like 196, and then it averages out to 199.997 or
Yeah.
something. I'm like,
Yeah.
So I had to get to that spinning point again for a split second, and then back off a teeny bit and go, okay, right there. And my
Gee.
return run was 203.
Holy cow.
So, no, it was 201.
Mm-hmm.
My record on that bike is 203 point something.
Because the
Holy cow.
205 and the 201
So it's the
combined.
205 and 201. So, I got in what's called the 2 Club, or 200 mile an hour club, and which you don't get any accolades, or I mean, you get some
Sure.
high fives from your peers, but
No hats? No t-shirts? What?
I got a hat.
There you go.
But that in a non-streamlined motorcycle, naturally aspirated, you're in a handful of people that maybe like 10 on the planet
Wow.
have gone over 200 with no streamlining
That's
at Bonneville.
Crazy.
Now,
Like thousands of people have climbed Everest,
yeah.
Yeah.
and I get to be part of a handful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Truly.
So,
Now, the record that you beat was an old record, right? Like, what was the
Yeah.
previous record? Was 150,
169.
169. So, and that record was, how long was that record in place?
I think it went back to the 70s.
Yeah.
So,
Wow, that held for a
And-
long time.
yeah, and normally, you smashing a record is like 8 or 9 miles an hour. You
Uh-huh.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So to smash one by like 40 is kind of a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah,
It
good
was
luck
a-
for the next guy. You know?
It was
Truly.
a funny experience because, the build process, I didn't think about writing it. I was just building it, ding, 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 every day, every day,
Mhm.
every day.
Yeah.
Okay, you know exactly what you're going to do the next day, right where you left off. It's crunch time, and funny story, it was like 1 month before Bonneville, and I walked into the shop and I was like, Carl, it'll go, but maybe I'll do some test runs, but it's just I cannot get it done in time.
Hmm.
And that was on like a Friday, and he was like, yeah, bummer. And then I thought about it all weekend, and I was like, no, this is the Bonneville story. This is what we
Mhm.
do. We roll
Yeah.
up our sleeves. And Monday morning, I hit the ground running again, and was like, no, I'm going to make it.
Yep.
And somehow got it done in time. But
Gee.
it's 2 inches off the ground. You can't test run it anywhere.
No.
And you can't, so it's like, and then you bring it to Bonneville, and you're at the parking lot and the hotel, and all of the other racers are there, and
Yeah.
everybody's walking up and looking at it, and they're like, who's going to ride this? So it's like, you're already part of a group of the crazies,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then the crazies are calling you crazy. So then you're like,
Yes.
man, what did I do?
Yeah.
Because then I'm starting to question myself, like, well, I mean, the
Yeah.
first time we started it up in the shop, and, whapa, whapa, and posters and frames are flying off the walls, and stuff's like, it was like, I started to shake, like, this is really an incredible machine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I'm into.
Almost like Oppenheimer in this way, correct? You
Yeah,
know?
it was,
Should we have built this? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big what if,
Yeah.
and so you, man, I get really excited.
It's crazy.
Just talking
really
about
exciting.
it.
It's crazy when you have an idea in your head and you're just going along and getting it done,
Yeah.
and you don't ever step back to think, oh, I gotta, like in your case, I gotta ride this now.
Yeah,
Right?
It
Like-
was the last. It was the last item on the list.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, whatever.
Well, and the frame is so unique, right? It's like a truss, essentially, like a triangle truss.
Yeah, it looks like a radio antenna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the two halves come together, so it had to be disassemblable. And yeah, what a neat experience.
What's the drive like Bonneville? Like when did you set your sights on that? When was that presented to you?
I think it started at a young age,
Yeah.
reading books in the library
Mhm.
at school. Well, it was the 70s, so we were into Evel Knievel, Bruce Lee, and the Blue Flame, and just a handful of the big things that were going on.
Yeah.
It was probably Roger DeCoster, or
Mm-hmm.
Kenny Roberts, or some of these motorcycle racers that we knew their names, or could mention them.
Mhm.
But looking at the books in school on Bonneville, it was just looked like a really neat place, and it also looked like something you could do. Like,
Sci-fi,
oh,
sci-fi almost.
you can go in a straight line as fast as you can. How hard is it?
Mhm.
But then I kept trying to go for like 20 years. I was like, just going to go as a spectator and
Yeah.
check it out. The hallowed ground,
Mhm.
it's the mecca of hot rodding, and everybody has to go there at least once. And so, but I just didn't know anything about it, and I didn't do enough research, like try even. It was just like, well, maybe you have to be invited, or,
Yeah.
how do you, is it invitational? You don't know anything. And
Yeah.
that's when we met Omar at Hannigan Speedway. I saw his bike, and I was like, whoa, what is this? This is really neat. And we found him, got to talking. He's like, well, you guys build motorcycles. You need a leather suit, $500, and a motorcycle that passes inspection. You know?
That was it.
Okay.
Wow.
So,
All you needed was permission.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing now. That story was like, yeah, you can.
yeah, and I think that, you know, there's always I mean, the gift is in the building process. You know, we made models when we were kids,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd get the last piece glued on, and you get the stance just right. You had this '68 Chevelle, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you'd set it on the shelf. You'd look at it for a minute, and then it's like, next.
Yep.
You know, there wasn't, so it's like, yeah, the joy comes from the craft and using these tools,
Yep.
or
Totally.
the connection between your head and your hands.
Yep.
Mhm.
You know, that harmony that exists through repetition and the law of 10,000 hours and all those things. And I was, we watched Eric Liddell, his story, the Olympic runner from the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
He was British, and he went on to be a missionary in China. You've probably
Mm-hmm.
read his story. And he talked about his running. And he was like, God made me fast.
Mm.
And so when I'm running, it's a form of worship
Mm.
that
I love
that I'm giving back to God. And I thought about it like recently. I was reading in Luke the parable of the minas,
Mm.
and it's like the one guy got 10, and you know
Mhm.
he developed it, and you know here your
Minus
10
meaning
your-
currency.
yeah, your 10 minas has earned 10 more. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I don't have any skills. I didn't give myself these skills. I didn't create these skills. They were given to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so my skill set is my 10 minas. And so I'm in a way worshiping God by using these tools to create this,
Mm-hmm.
to make 1 mina 203 miles an hour. you
Yeah.
know? And
It's the
so
fastest mina ever.
yeah, so
God was
it's like I don't think that there isn't purpose to it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and Jesus said, "Occupy yourself until I return."
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
love that.
that's staying pretty occupied.
Yeah,
you
I'd
know?
say.
But there's a it's a lot to balance, you know.
I
You know,
mean,
my
when you
wife's crying every pass, you know, because she thinks I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And you know, you can die. So, but those thoughts aren't really in your head at the time.
yeah.
You're like,
You
man,
can't-
I get to do this.
Yeah.
This is gonna be really hard and really scary. But I get to.
You seem like a guy that also doesn't live in fear much. If I
Yeah.
could assume that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get really rattled.
Yeah.
You know, I can go flying off the road into a ditch, eating a sandwich, adjusting the radio, and
Yeah.
it's like,
But you should have seen him
So-
in Bonneville.
My dad always said, "Don't ever let fear or common sense hold you back."
I love that.
It was usually as a threat, but I took it as a life advice.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and God don't like a coward.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
We say that a lot at Bonneville.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Go on,
Um,
go.
You think about, like, you accomplished something that, like you said, 10 people have ever done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a very tiny mountain peak, right?
Yeah.
To get there is a lot of work, and we've talked a lot about that. But what about discouragement? Like,
Hmm.
what kept you moving forward? Or when you left the shop on a Friday and we're like, I don't think I'm going to get this done. What brought you back on Monday with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
I think just knowing that it can be done, like anything can be done,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody faced that difficulty ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who held the record
Yeah.
went through that same thing. And so I think you have to sort of find that you're not the only one experiencing a hardship,
Mm.
and that it 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 takes, I mean, there's, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I feel like desire is something that you can't teach
Mm-hmm.
and you can't
Yeah, I agree.
train for. And I think desire and curiosity creates attraction. And so that desire and curiosity sort of synergistically becomes your passion.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you kind of, you know, well, nobody else is going to do this for me.
Yeah.
And, so you end up lecturing the guy in the mirror a lot, and well, this is your chance to, prove yourself wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, and I think that grindstone, that that repetition of the same thing, it it translates through any walk of life and any hobby or project,
Mm-hmm.
and I admire, I admire anything that takes effort,
Yeah.
and people that are dedicated to something, and
Mhm.
have that diligence and passion to, I mean, musical instruments,
Yeah.
or, you only get one day every day,
Yep.
right? You're living your life in one day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a series of many days stacked up,
Mm-hmm.
but you only ever get that one day. And that, you're just not going to pick up a guitar in the morning and be a master by 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's over and over and over again, And so I think that coupling that with the fight, with the hardship, that you kind of end up with a chip on your shoulder, that you're always fighting to prove something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, because you didn't get what somebody else got. You didn't
Yeah.
have the provisions and the way paved for you. It was always hard. So, but like, I'm thankful now because it makes everything a lot easier today,
Mm.
I feel.
Yeah.
Because it's, on one hand, you become calloused or jaded and, less compassionate, I guess.
Mhm.
I'm a good teacher, just not a great boss, because
Mm.
I have, my expectation levels are up here.
Yeah.
No, no, that's a mosquito bite.
Mm-hmm.
Get better, do more.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm pretty demanding. Luckily, my kids are turning out.
You don't have to toss one out. You're like, okay.
No.
Lars is running really fast, and I'm not doing anything other than playing with them.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not forcing them into anything. They don't have motorcycles. We ride bikes.
Mm-hmm.
But Lars is 6, and he went. He started soccer this year. We just did an 8-week session
Yeah.
with Lakeside.
Yeah.
And I pull up to the practice, and I'm like, "All right, Lars, I'm not here. When you step onto that field, it's the coach. You don't look at me. You don't ask Dad anything. The coach is now Dad."
Yeah.
And just run faster than everybody else, and they'll pay attention to you. Okay. he took off running, and I mean, just grinning from ear to ear the whole time.
Yeah.
Fastest kid on the team, scored the most goals. All the parents are looking at me after a few weeks. They're like, "What?" I was like, "I took him to Portugal this summer and trained with the minor leagues over there." And yeah, I was just making up stories.
Absolutely.
I was like, "You guys, I'm not even a soccer guy.
Yeah.
I just told him to run fast.
Yep.
He's just lightning fast. It's hilarious.
It's amazing.
So
I love that though.
I
Like,
don't-
no
I don't-
stress,
you know,
simplify it, run fast. They will see you.
yeah,
It's so great.
We try to
but
overcomplicate it sometimes.
We do.
Yeah.
I know I do personally, and I'm like, I keep it simple, Ryan. Keep it simple.
we say that a lot. Occam's razor
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
I mean, it's a long paragraph of a
Yeah.
theory, but essentially it's the simplest way is usually the best.
Yes.
And that's what we break it down to. Like, and I think that's the attraction of land speed motorcycles and building them is that, we built choppers and these radical motorcycles for years, and it was like you had to have all these things, and then you got to have, you got to pass, inspect, all this stuff. A land speed motorcycle, just if it doesn't need to be on there, it's not going on.
Yeah.
It's an engine and wheels and handlebars, and there's just no frills, no blinkers, no.
I love that.
You didn't put dice valve covers on the wheels or like
no.
the stick-on stuff from O'Reilly's and
Too much drag. That'd
Yeah.
be too much drag. Yeah.
We did paint them really nice.
Yes.
And I believe that racing stripes were part of racing from day one.
Yeah.
And so I believe in a vehicle or a racing vehicle looking good, looking fast, and I mean, as soon as racing starts, you drag your boot over it.
Yeah.
It's
It's
done
like-
for.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, it looks nice for one day. The tech inspection on Saturday is the
Yeah.
best because everybody's bike looks magnificent. It's like one big smorgasbord. They're all coming through tech, so you can walk up and down and check out all these bikes, and they're all polished and clean and nice. By
Wow.
like day 3,
That's
they're
cool.
just covered with salt and everything's just
Or like you said, I just threw it on the ground. And,
yeah.
Speaking of that, like, so with the design of that bike, that just is like trial and error. Like first year, okay, I need to tweak it up this way. Second year, okay, this needed to be tweaked.
We had a little help on that one with the little twin engine Yamaha. That was the little brother.
Yeah.
And Omar had studied these pictures, found them in a book from the 30s, and it was called duplex steering, and it was used on some British bikes, but they were with full forked front ends. But the theory was that we could reduce that height and have 4 steer tubes on each side of the wheel connected to the axle. And if you can imagine that my elbows are stationary and the fronts are turning, and this is the axle, it's steering like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then there wasn't this steer tube above the top of the tire, and then your handlebars up here, and then your helmet. Well, now you're losing 18 inches of frontal area.
Wow.
That you could just be, here's your tire and here's your eyeballs.
Mhm.
That was the theory. So that bike was sort of the prototype, and then I built the big brother to that.
Yeah.
So it proved how stable that steering was.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it just the faster it went, and also if you were like sitting in the parking lot and cranked the wheel, the bike raised up because it's like
Yeah.
backwards of your trail dimension.
Mhm.
Well, it's a formula but it's like essentially like a shopping cart going backwards. It was doing the opposite of what a normal motorcycle would. So as you could let go of the bars and it was going to go to center.
Huh.
So it
that's
got
awesome.
more and more stable the faster you went. So it was just an incredible design of steering.
Yeah.
And
The little brother one, that's the one that you race in the documentary, right?
correct.
That's not the one that you set the record on.
No.
And it's crazy when you watch it because it looks like you have a GoPro or something on your head and then you got one facing
Yeah.
you. and you feel like when you're watching that, you feel like you are on that bike, right? I mean, none of us
Yeah.
are. We are all eating popcorn sitting on our couches.
Yeah.
But
Great choice.
the violent, the violence you talk about and the intensity and the micro movements, it captures the documentary captures it so well.
Yeah.
But that is so small in comparison to what you ultimately did, right? Like,
Well, and it's hilarious because it was just one overcast day, and I told Chad, I was like, Chad, I'm going to go without glasses, and let's point a camera at my eyes. He's like, okay. So we set it up like that, not knowing that, I can walk through, I could like tell you for a minute exactly what's going on just watching my eyeballs.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, there's my track. I'm checking the flags. I'm looking at my tack. Shift, and you just see my eyeballs moving around like
Yeah.
this. It was like that cat with the
and at
funny
some point they
eyeballs.
do this. They're like going in opposite directions.
One's looking down here, one's over here.
Yeah.
That's the force of 200 miles an hour.
But yeah, that we watched it at the Salt like that night. Like Chad's like, Mark, look at this. This is great, and it just became such a funny little video we just watch over and over again, just laughing, like, because you never saw him blink. It was just like, and but that told the story of the pure concentration that, it's like, yeah.
It's crazy. You didn't check your phone one time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're cruising. You're not like, got a
shoot.
notification on my watch.
You blink, you'd miss it, though. I
Yeah.
mean, a football field a second. I mean, come on.
I got one more funny story. The year I got the record, that was on a Monday morning or a Sunday morning, and then Carl's Ducati, he blew his clutch, so I pulled one of my clutches and gave him to him, and I was like, I'm done, But as the week wore on, I was like, well, we can get a new clutch in Salt Lake City, and we sent a guy to go get a clutch, and by about Wednesday, Thursday, I'm like, well, I think I can get another run in. And everybody else had run, and so I was like, well, I'm going to go again. So it's like the last day, and it's so hot, and you're in black leather, and you have friends and family holding the umbrellas, and you're drinking water, and I was about to go, and we got to get the bike unloaded and pointed at the course, and, it's a whole thing. And so I had my helmet, and I was like breathing underneath it, like, oh, and then the flag drop. Okay. Well, I never cinched the strap because I had been like breathing out the bottom of it. So then I take off and I'm shifting through the gears. But before I left, I had put my phone, I had turned on my GPS and stuffed it in my jacket, like for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I get into the last gear and I'm getting up to speed, and I make that one last course correction. I remember I was like kind of going to the left, and I turned towards the tower. The tower's right in the middle of the flying mile. And then all of a sudden my helmet flips up. And so the mouthpiece is over my eyes. And I'm like, geez. And I start flipping my head, and I won't back off. I don't know why, but I wouldn't back off. I was like, no, it'll come down. It'll come down. And about the 10th whip, the wind caught it and pulled it down. And I was like, okay. And there's all 4 flags right in front of me. I had veered all the way over. I'm going 200 and some miles an hour, and there's all 4 flags, and they have these giant PVC teepees that hold them up.
Yeah.
They're like 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
They're big flags. And I was like, oh, shoot. And zipped right underneath them. But I know that I'm going out of bounds, and I'm thinking about the tower like, oh, boy. And for some reason, I started dragging my foot. I mean, I let off on the throttle right away.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I started dragging my foot just out of a reaction because you're going into the rough salt that's not the groomed course.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, and so then I steered out of it and steered back onto the course, and I was like, well, my run is ruined, so I might as well just get off the course. And I blasted back down onto the track and pulled off at the end. And so I pulled off by the tent that's down there, and I threw the bike down. I went running over there. I was like, you got to stop the course, stop the course. I blew up the eyes or the metering system. I knew that I had done some damage to it.
Yeah.
So they radio the tower, and then I'm like, oh, I have Rex's phone number, the head official up there. So I call him up. I'm like, Rex, I'm sorry. I ruined racing for everybody. He's like, Mark, I'm standing here by these flags, and I can see your tire track. Nothing happened. Everything's fine. I was like, sweet.
Huh.
Yeah.
So I happened to miss, the eye or the timing light was like over 8 or 10 feet that way. And the height of the flags started just high enough that I shot underneath, and the PVC, like if that hit your hand.
Oh,
Can you
yeah.
200
imagine?
miles per hour? Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, that's right. I didn't get a time because I missed the timing light.
Uh-huh.
I pull out my phone, 210.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No. Because your GPS, that's genius.
So I started laughing. I was like, I just went 210 miles an hour trying to get my helmet
With
to
your-
come back to come on.
Most dangerous
Blind.
game.
You
Yeah.
went 210 blind. Is
Yeah,
what you did.
absolutely.
They-
Absolutely.
And they came and picked me up, and I was just laughing. And I think the only other scare was a year later. I ran it at World of Speed. It's a Utah Salt Flat Racing Association. It's a September event. It's a
Mhm.
great event, cars and bikes and whatever. It's sponsored by SCTA, so it would be considered a world record instead of a national record.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There's only one Bonneville, so
Yeah.
I have a national record. So
Yeah.
I'm a little, I'm just a little guy.
It happens to some people.
So
Just a little guy.
when the course was so rough this year, and I tried to run down the flags on the left side because the middle was all rutted up from cars, and it was getting rougher and rougher and rougher, and I thought it would straighten out, or I thought it would get better by going faster. So I just kept going faster and faster, and it was just getting so violent because I don't have front suspension. It's just rear
Mhm.
suspension because the front's just hard tubes.
Yep.
I don't know what was going on, and I think I was too scared to back out of it and too scared to keep going. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so violent, and I got really scared. That's probably the scaredest I've ever been.
Wow.
And I pulled off the course, and I just dumped the bike. I pulled off my helmet, and I was just crying.
Yeah.
Like I was like, what you crying for?
Yeah.
You know, I just had tears streaming down my face, and I was like, whoa, that was weird. I mean, I'm not that
Yeah.
kind of tough.
Yeah.
But it was I think my body was just emotionally shook from it.
Uh-huh.
The experience was
Yeah.
like, okay, that's an experience I don't want to have.
Yeah, like your body's like,
again.
I
Yeah.
sense the danger.
So I took the bikes disassembled. I mean, it should like be in a land speed museum, or
sure.
Yeah.
it should go to a,
For sure.
it should just be on display somewhere, or it
Yeah.
should be a static art piece, I guess, because
It's a little too
It's-
long to put on the wall right here.
Yeah,
It
but it
is.
is an art piece. Though. When you see it, you're like, it's gorgeous.
it's
Yeah.
very capable of. I mean, can you imagine if Carl hammered out some aluminum streamlining, and that platform could easily go north of 250. I mean,
Mm.
there's a tipping point after 250. Like that's where tires start failing and X meets Y on a graph, where it's like everybody dies after 250.
Oh.
And I don't know why these guys keep going and keep going. It's like, man, it's eating ice cream up to
Yeah.
180.
Sure.
180 to there's a weird anomaly at like 170. There's this speed wobble. There's this weird, nobody can define it.
Hmm.
There's this wall you have to go through that's like a weird little, whoa, that's weird. And then beyond it, it clears up and everything's smooth again.
Hmm.
And for some reason, motorcycles have this 175-mile-an-hour little porthole you have to go through.
Really?
And then when you're coming back down it, there's a little more. And I didn't experience that because I was laying down and,
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was experiencing. And so,
No one has.
but that funny little window is below that 0 to 150. I mean, on the movie Ducati, I
Yeah.
would do passes with one arm behind my back. I would try different, aerodynamics. My hose fell off my master cylinder. Both bikes, I've actually done more passes at Bonneville with no brakes than
Wow.
having
Gee.
brakes. I mean, you need them to pass inspection, but you
Sure.
don't really need them. I mean,
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you're riding out at the end,
as
right?
soon as you let off on the throttle, that wind is just slowing you down. You just turn into a brick immediately.
It's
And
like
you're
a
slowing
parachute
down.
or something.
Then you can slowly, like as you feel yourself decelerating, you can kind of start to pull up and flying squirrel the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, reliving an adventure.
Yeah.
It's
That
wild.
was really something. I wanted to capture that I was going somewhere with the desire and dedication and diligence, but I think it would be good to talk about association because no man stands alone at the top.
Yeah.
I mean, there's easily 8 to 10 people around me
Mm-hmm.
every time we ran. Yeah, it was
Uh-huh.
only 7 times, but there's so many people that support you in the build process, in the racing
Yeah.
process. You just can't do it alone. It
Yeah.
requires a team, and that association of people. You know, I don't want to be the best or the smartest guy in the room. I just want to be in the right room.
Yep.
Yeah.
And get to be a part of some great men and minds and old wise men that I can
Mhm.
learn from and glean insight from. And how did you what did you do when you got here?
Absolutely.
And so I think and it's just it's a commonality or a common thread in the Bible.
Mhm.
Your association, you hang out with bunch of tweakers, you're eventually going to start tweaking.
That's
you
the Mark
just,
International version.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
have to,
It's newer.
you have to, be around people that are going to bring you up a peg,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
challenge you to do more.
Be better.
Yep.
That's why I think as a common thread that we're going to see with a lot of the people that we interview this season is, if you have to be the best at everything in the room,
Mhm.
you're not going to accomplish anything. But when you surround yourself with people that push you and build with you,
Yeah.
you're able to do things beyond your own capabilities,
Yeah.
your own understanding. And so I love that you address that, because racing a motorcycle at Bonneville is a individual thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
Carl didn't ride piggyback with you down that, which would have been hilarious.
Would have been great. Yeah.
That that little bandana just flammering in the wind, but
They
there
do
was.
have a sidecar class.
Do they really? But there is people that have come and you lifted one another up. You did something that you
Yeah.
couldn't do. I love the documentary, really lays that out well, that everybody kind of had their role.
In that growth together too was, it was my favorite part of it.
Yeah, I mean, in the pits, a bike comes in, and what do we need to do? What's next? What's wrong? What's broken? What are we
Yeah.
fixing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of my axle clamps, the front axle's a 1-inch axle, and I welded these clamshells on there. For some reason, I welded all the stuff on the front, and I don't really, I can weld, but I mean, I'm not like TIG welder guru. And
Yes.
one of them cracked, and it was like nobody was gonna die, but that thing could start to, it was like
One thing leads to
we had
another.
to weld that on the salt, trying to find a TIG welder. Somebody has one, but yeah, the pits and everything gets salt on it. The bright spot is like the one little piece of carpet you bring so you can get out of your clothes, stand on some carpet, get your leathers on,
Yeah.
pull your boots on, and that's like your one little
yoga
nice
mat.
something that, keeps the gnar out of everything. But yeah, you just every bike, there's just so much going on. It's really busy.
Yeah.
And it's just nonstop.
Well, like you're saying, I mean, it's the timing. It's how every piston is firing,
Yeah.
and everything has to work in such harmony continuously for it to happen, right? Like the documentary shows time and time again, one little failure
Yeah.
and you are out of the running, right?
Yeah.
Or it's catastrophic,
Yeah, or you spend all day fixing it.
Yeah.
And then you got to run again the next day, and then you got to wait in line. You're always waiting in line,
Mhm.
like 2 hours of waiting in line. But it's fun
Yeah.
because everybody else is waiting in line.
You're
and
all
You're
hanging out.
talking and laughing, and yeah, you get to hang out with some giants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like you got to meet some heroes while you were there? Was there anybody that stood out to you like, oh man, I was really excited to be around this person? Or
Yeah, I think the greatness, they're all very humble. They're icons in the sport. There's a lot of guys, Hiro Koiso, Kaz, the Japanese racers, their program is just perfect.
Mm.
Just everything's so dialed.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of discipline they have. And Hero's wrecked like 3 or 4 times at 200, tire failures.
holy
His
cow.
triple trees fell apart one run. I mean, the dude, and he walks away laughing every time. He had some broken hands. He had to go get his hands put back together. But yeah, just water off a duck like it's nothing. And Tom Malore, he's this old guy. He's got a 1968 Triumph, a 2-cylinder Triumph, and he's put it over 200. He's running on alcohol or who knows what.
Moonshine.
Extremely high compression.
Yeah.
No turbocharging, no supercharging. Vintage motor.
Amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just yeah, there's some really neat people there. You're a gearhead. You need to
Yeah,
go
right?
with us.
Bonneville's been on my list forever. And when you were talking about going to the car races at Bonneville, like that's something I've always wanted to see as well. Like I remember watching those videos as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Like those old classic cars with the moon discs, on the wheels shooting down the salt there.
The hot
And it
rod.
looks like the moon, right? So it looks otherworldly.
It's so sci-fi.
Yeah.
So sci-fi.
I saw Speed Demon, George Poteet, the owner, and he's like 80 years old. I'm standing right in front of the car. He's got a crew of 25 dudes. They're all in matching brown uniforms. They're dialed in. It's a multi-million-dollar project.
Yeah.
He hops out of the air-conditioned truck, and he's in his racing suit, and he walks up to it and climbs inside. He's this old man.
Jeez.
And I purposefully sat or stood right behind it when he left because I just wanted to listen to perfection.
Yeah.
And I just turned my ear and I just listened. And it was just like, whatever it is, 3,500 horsepower. I mean, it's got turbos the size of babies. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like,
Just butter.
it was just like, you just didn't hear a hiccup or a flaw.
Perfect tuning.
Yeah.
It's just perfect audio. And then you hear on the radio, 479 miles an hour.
Oh,
Piston driven, wheel driven. It's just incredible.
amazing.
And but I talked to the crew chief of that build. And he's like, yeah, no computers, no blueprints, string line on the shop floor, tape measures and string lines. And I was
Wow.
like, nice.
That,
Because that's exactly how I built mine.
that's how you do it.
Just
That's how you do it. Speaking of icons too, I think one of the things that I love the most, and I know it's a mutual friend of ours that made the connection, but I love that Jim Phillips did the Super Rat logo. Jim Phillips is a skateboard designer, and he did the Santa Cruz screaming hand
Yes.
that was really popular when I was young on skateboarding,
Oh yeah.
and I grew up loving skateboarding. But he did the Super Rat hand.
yes.
It's amazing to me.
So iconic.
Yeah, thanks to Matt French.
Yeah. Oh, Matt
Matt
is iconic in his own right.
Yeah,
Matt got
yeah.
Jim. Yeah. Matt will make every room more interesting than it was before he got there.
Yes, he will.
He's you always want him around more than you don't want him around. Sometimes you don't want him around.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes Matt's got to go, but
It's an acquired taste.
Get the French out of here.
that guy that was we should have him on
You
here. He's-
really, that was gonna be my first suggestion when I walked in. I was like, that was like the thought that came. I was like, oh, Matt French.
Yep. We've been friends for a long, and he's too incredibly generous. All the youth stuff I did over the years, he would just show up with boxes of skateboards and
Yeah.
swag and things that he designed, and he would hand it to you. And I have in my favorite books at my house, I have the coloring book that he did with Jim Phillips. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh,
Jim, I
wow.
got to visit him in 2007. I rode my motorcycle to California, and middle of winter. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was fun. It was a Ducati.
Heck yeah, it was.
And I got to visit Jim at his home, and just such a neat guy to go and look at all his art
Yeah.
and pull out
Oh
the
my
archives and just go through it all. And his wife made us sandwiches. We had lunch, and he
amazing.
said grace, and it was just really neat. He's just and he was building this hot rod, and he had all these chicken scratch drawings of brackets, and how he was working on something. Yeah, Mark, look at this. I'm doing, and when I do a little sketch of something, or I'm trying to figure out a ratio, or
Mhm.
solve a leverage point, or you do some blueprints.
Yep.
And but his were, you can imagine what his pictures looked like. I mean, just perfection.
Yeah.
It's like he can't just.
He can't sketch like we sketch.
Yeah. It was just like.
Just a quick. He's like, no.
It's like, oh man, I wish I would have taken pictures of him. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's just like, look at these, 3D bracket. Yeah, those for my, and he's explaining it all. Yeah, that guy proves the law of 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And man.
Yeah.
And art's hard because I always see pictures in my head, and I'm always drawing funny little cartoons for my kids. I'm
Huh.
really into these pig people. Or people that look like pigs.
Yeah.
And
Ryan's relatives.
Yeah.
yeah.
All me and the pig people.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I can have a picture in my head and try and draw it, and it's like, oh yeah, no, that's not what I saw up there.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't compute on the page. You're like, come
Matt
on.
French, we used to just sit, and he was like 18 or 19. He was young at the time, and he would just draw little characters over and over again, and they were always animals.
Huh.
A frog doing something, or a
Hmm.
frog playing the banjo, or it was just. And he would just draw one after another, and I just sit there and laugh and laugh and laugh, just watching his cartoons
Amazing.
just out of thin air.
Out of nothing.
And
Out
just
of
honing
nothing.
Yep.
his craft.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. Last question, and I'm sure it'll go in somewhere else, but I was just thinking about it. You grew up, in a family that didn't have a lot of means, as you shared. When did you start getting into bikes, building bikes?
Mhm.
And because there's this gap, I think, in the story from kid that grew up to that didn't have much to I'm building a world champion motorcycle.
Bonneville royalty, if you will,
Yeah,
right? Rags
so-
to riches.
What's the middle part? Like, who taught you how to build bikes? What did that look like?
Man, I think it goes back to Volkswagens and 3 older brothers, and we weren't allowed motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all gearheads, loved working on cars, and we really got into Volkswagens for a time period. Like 1980 to 1990 was a 10 years of Volkswagens.
Well, they were
we
cool then,
really
too.
got into them, and Tom was a really bright mechanic, our oldest brother. He went to school for engine building and stuff, and he was just a natural talent. And then I was always handing him wrenches and cleaning parts and stuff.
Yep.
So, and then Carl was always Carl was into welding early on,
Mm.
and then Matt was somewhere in between there doing whatever, and he had a cool Scirocco, and but Tom's first car when he got his license is like, what you gonna get? You know, we're thinking muscle cars and whatever, and he gets a '66 Volkswagen Bug. We're like, okay, you know. But then we really got into them, and we were lowering them and building these crazy engines. And so once I moved out of the house at 19, you know, I got a motorcycle immediately, and then the tattoo was next,
Yes.
which I kept hidden from my mom. My mom died without ever knowing I had a tattoo.
Oh, you're kidding.
I don't know if that's a
Wow.
good thing or not. But,
Well, she
good
knows
on you.
now, buddy.
Respectful.
so and I got a crown of thorns.
Mm.
Oh, you said something about tattoo artists in the 90s.
Oh,
All they
yeah.
ever had to do was barbed wire and Taz.
Yes, and barbed wire and Taz.
It's so true. It's so true.
Oh man, yeah, I had the crown of thorns. So I was afraid of motorcycles at first, and I knew that Mom and Dad didn't want us to have them, so
Yeah.
I got a 75 Harley FLH,
Okay.
because I thought if I get an old clapped out pile of junk Harley, I'll never go fast. I'll learn how to ride, and that was one of those that I had laid in bed and started it up and revved the throttle and clicked it down one and let out the clutch. I had done this motorcycle ride in my head 10,000 times as a kid.
Mm.
And so I got this Harley from a guy who worked at the Harley shop when it was on Meridian, where the mattress stores are right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
That used to be Bellingham Harley. So I met him there. I gave him the cash. He had bought another bike, and he's like, well, Mark, I'll go for a little ride with you, and we'll go ride around Cordata. And there's like 8 banditos in there and all these bearded biker dudes, and I'm a 19-year-old kid, and I
Yeah.
think I'm wearing jam pants and some Vans.
Yes.
I looked really dumb. And
You look the best of them.
and so I wasn't going to tell him I had never ridden a motorcycle, because I was like, well, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. And I took off with him, and we went into Cordata and ripped around, and it worked exactly as it had in my head 1,000 times.
That's crazy.
And I just rode around like nothing. I was like, man, this was way too easy. And because all I had was bicycles
Yeah.
yeah.
experience. So eventually, you know, you're afraid to work on your bike because, you know, if you forget something, you could die.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So you have to take it to a motorcycle shop. So I kept getting my bike back from motorcycle shops, and I'd have to go around and tighten all the nuts and bolts. And I was like, well, if I have to do this, I might as well trust myself.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually all the brothers got motorcycles.
Hmm.
And Carl got one, and he was like, well, the definition of a chopper is that you chop up a stock motorcycle.
Yeah.
That's where the word chopper comes from.
Yeah.
So we chop it up. And so he had gotten this Heritage Softail, and I remember being in the garage and We fired up the demo saw and just lopped off the back half. Okay.
It's
we're-
chopped.
We're over on this side of the
Over
fence now. So that's sort of the segue, if that answers your question. It
yeah.
went from Volkswagens and cars. Well, because Mom got really mad when there was 20 Volkswagens in the yard and was like, no more Volkswagens. This is idolatry. Okay.
Yeah.
So we got rid of all the motorcycle or all the Volkswagens, and then and we're like, well, we can get some muscle cars. And I think Carl got a '64 Chevelle, and
Beautiful.
I forget, it had a 396, and it was just a tire boiler. That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different cars over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So-
got my first car when I was 14, and my granddad, dad, and some of my granddad and dad's friends and my cousin taught me how to build it. So for 2 years, I learned how to restore this car. And by my 16th birthday, I was driving it, right? And it's funny because I dated a girl who had a Volkswagen Bug, and I pitched her all sorts of crap because I had a 77 Nova, right? Like I had a cool car. Until I went over
Well,
to her.
that was one of the cool years.
Yeah.
True.
I went over to her house.
Was that a
though.
Londo?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't even a cool Nova, but it was beautiful.
But it
like-
was mine.
and I built it, right?
Yeah.
But I remember going over to her house, and I was always pitching her crap about this little Volkswagen until I went over to her house one weekend, and her dad and her were pulling the engine, and she was putting a Porsche engine in it. And I was like, wait, what? Like,
And she's cool. Yeah,
this is amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
truly.
that's where I really started to take notice of Volkswagens because it wasn't this little lawnmower engine in the back of a tin can driving down the street. It was like, oh, you could really mod these things
Yeah.
up really cool, right? That's
Still
amazing.
to this day, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and we're fortunate today because, people that, well, once you get beyond the point of like, well, I don't know what to be passionate about.
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm good. I'm not good at anything. Well, you aren't good at anything.
Mhm.
Listen to yourself. You
Yeah.
have to change your speech and your thoughts and your. So, this, once, and I always tell kids, especially, follow your curiosity
Yep.
because that'll tell you what you're attracted to. And
Yeah.
Curiosity can and keep trying stuff.
Yep.
And if you don't know how to do something and you can't figure it out, there's just so much resources online now.
Yep.
Like you can, I fixed my fuel door the other day after a 1-minute video.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like it kept flopping open,
Yep.
and all I had to do was, it's
Yep.
just like we're really lucky.
Absolutely.
Like you can
I've become
learn a
yeah,
lot.
Yeah, I've had to become a YouTube mechanic for sure, out of necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, back when I was growing up, when we were growing up, you were limited by the knowledge of your granddad and your next door neighbor and
Yeah.
your dad, right? Like whoever
Yeah.
whoever was around, that was the extent of the knowledge you got.
You better hope you had a sage around, or else
Yes.
you knew nothing.
Yeah.
And our dad was not a mechanic.
Hmm.
And he'd change the oil, drain all the oil, and then he'd start up the engine and rev it a couple times. One to shake out all the oil.
Oh my gosh.
And shut it off. And only for a few seconds, but I remember even being kids like, I don't think that's correct, Dad. But we didn't want to say anything.
Yeah,
It's
of
Dad.
his dad.
Of course, yeah.
But man, we laughed about that later on.
Wow.
Like, no.
Yeah.
What made him do that?
It's,
We even asked him. Oh, I don't know.
it seems right.
Yeah.
That's such bad advice.
You
That's such a
gotta-
bad thing your
You
dad did.
gotta shake him around a bit. Come on.
Yeah, you got to get every droplet out.
Every morsel.
So, Mark, one of the things I want to do on this podcast in 2024 is I want to set a land speed record. And I'm going to tell you. So I have a Guinness World Record for organizing the largest hayride,
I remember that.
and I want to do another world record. And I saw one that really piqued my curiosity. It was the world's fastest garbage can. And so this guy took a garbage can, he put a little Harbor Freight motor in it, and he got it going to 62 miles an hour. One of those blue garbage cans at the side of the road, you know?
Mhm.
And I watched that video and I thought, I think I could beat that. Like 62 miles an hour? I could absolutely beat that. And essentially what he did is put the garbage can over a drift trike frame. And he sat on top of the motor inside of this thing. No steering, just throttle, and a little hole cut out in the front. And he just went, right? And I thought, I know a couple guys to call.
Oh yeah.
I think we could. If I could get a garbage can to go over 100 miles an hour, that would probably be the greatest accomplishment of 2024.
You'd also be in an exclusive club that you and one other guy are in.
Well, and what could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
Yeah. I want to spectate this.
The garbage can is, well, I think as part of the show, that's what it'd be something to be fun to do, right? Like we
Agreed.
build it, we document it, because I think it's not just talking about the stuff that we did, or are doing, but like I want to show people too. Like,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
and that's just stupid.
Nobody
enough
wants
work.
to watch a bunch of talking heads.
Yeah.
Like, is anybody even going to watch this?
No.
Like 7 people.
Except
7.
my pig family. They will. The
Your
ginger
pig
pigs.
family
Yeah.
will gather around
Yeah.
with a bucket of oats.
But I would like to dream about that a little bit with you, and we could work on some sketches. I think
And there has to be a banana peel and some fish bones and a dirty diaper.
For
exactly.
sure.
Well,
Standard garbage fare.
we could have Matt come in. I mean, I was thinking yesterday when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, I should dress up like Oscar the Grouch when I drive it, like, or we have Matt French paint the helmet
Yes.
like
just
Oscar's
yes.
head, right?
Yes.
Like, but I need to do it on a very limited budget.
Yep.
But I think we could build a garbage can to beat 62 miles an hour.
He said
I
it
think
here.
so.
He said it here, guys.
Yeah. And
62. Why 62?
that's the record the guy set.
Gotcha. That
Yeah.
does make sense. I'm
So,
sorry.
I
that
mean-
would be the previous record.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know where I went for a second there. Why so specific?
And the nice thing is, I don't have to go one way and then reprove it back the other way. We just have to
Right.
do
Yeah.
it one time. We could put a parachute on the back of it.
Oh my! There's no end to the possibilities
end.
of this.
I think if you think about getting over 70 miles an hour, though, you want to build a roll cage inside the garbage can
Yeah.
because But I did 172 once in a Porsche, and that was insane.
Mm.
I was also arrested on that same car drive for going that fast in a 45. But I can't imagine, and that was a car that was built for that kind of speed. I cannot imagine you take all of that away
Yeah.
and you put your elbows inches from the ground on slippery ice-like salt, and you just go.
And conditions better be perfect because it could be your life.
Yeah.
Like it's truly wild.
Yeah.
Mark, what you've done.
So, dude, I love you, man. I appreciate you being here. I'm I'm excited about your life. I'm excited about the babies you made, what you're building. And thanks for being on the Grindstone, man. We love having you.
That's what
Thanks
it's all
for
about.
having me. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I can contribute some inspiration and encourage people to do more, encourage people to encourage others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're so limited by the things we can't do that we don't try to do things
Yep.
that are hard. Like right now, I am already picturing jacking one of those garbage cans and starting to draw it out tonight. Like,
Yeah.
like because of this talk,
Yeah.
because of this time, I just,
And it's so easy to not
yeah,
do that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah, if you don't do anything, nothing happens.
Yep. time and time again. Mark Bjorkland, thanks for being on Grindstone. We hope you all enjoyed the golden nuggets of wisdom, and we'll see you next time.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you, man. Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude.